You were never a real man. That was the first thing out of her mouth when I walked into the living room that evening. No greeting, no polite acknowledgement, just that one sentence, loaded like a bullet. It knocked the breath out of me for half a second. I just set down my toolbox near the front door. I remember noticing a thin streak of grease on my forearm, the smell of metal still in my nose. She was standing by the window, arms folded, eyes fixed on me like she wanted to cut right through my chest. It took me a moment to realize she wasn't joking. Emily rarely spoke to me that way. But then again, I'd never seen her with that look on her face. I'd never pushed her to that point before, or maybe she'd never lowered herself to show me the contempt swirling just under the surface. I stood there, letting her words hang in the stale air of our house. My house, the place where I paid bills, fixed leaks, mowed the grass. The place where I thought I was building a life with her. A life we had started when she was just out of college, and I was home from my last tour. I stared at her. The adrenaline spiked in my stomach, but my voice stayed somewhere stuck in my throat. I recall looking at her like a man stares at a building that used to be his home, burned half to the ground. Something about the slant of her shoulders, the tightness of her jaw, and those words, "You were never a real man." That was new territory. It was cruel. It was final. It was personal. But let me backtrack. Because to understand why she said that, I need to start from the beginning. My beginning. Name's David. 53. I own a small auto repair shop. Mostly local customers. Some loyal folks from out of town who like my honest pricing. Grew up in Ohio. Served in the Army for a couple of years. Went to trade school after. Married Emily when I was in my early 30s. We have, or had, a son together. Brian. He's 15 now. Good kid. Or so I thought. I was the stable one. Steady job. Same routine day in and day out. My father raised me that way. No big fuss. No big drama. A man's gotta provide, he would say. So that's what I did. Maybe that was part of the problem. Maybe I was too predictable for her. Too simple, too set in my ways. But I was trying to do right by her, day by day, year by year. The real story began months before that night she said those words. It began in the most mundane way possible. I'd spent a Saturday working on one of my personal projects in the garage. A 1978 Chevy pickup I was refurbishing. Emily had gone out early that morning. Told me she'd be back sometime after noon. She had errands in town, or so she said. I thought nothing of it. I had an iced tea in the garage, old rock music crackling through a dusty radio, and a sense of peace that comes from tinkering with an engine that's older than some folks these days. Around midday, I stopped for lunch, but I realized I was out of bread. I walked inside, rummaged through the kitchen for a spare loaf. That's when I heard something upstairs. A faint noise, like a thump and then a low laugh. I froze. My first thought, Brian? But no, he was out with a friend. My second thought, Emily's back early. I moved to the bottom of the stairs. The front door was shut and locked. No sign of forced entry. For a few seconds, I just listened. Then I heard another sound, like muffled voices, a rustle, soft but urgent. And then, a laugh. Male, definitely male. I remember the feeling that flooded my whole body. Not quite anger yet, not quite fear, but an unmistakable sense that something was deeply wrong. My first instinct was to stomp up there and see who the hell it was. But something made me pause. Maybe it was a survival instinct, some primal knowledge that once you see certain things, you can't unsee them. I tried to call out, Emily. My voice came out calmer than I felt. No response. Then more muffled sounds. Footsteps. A door shutting. A hush, like someone trying not to be heard. I set my lunch down. Slowly, I moved up the stairs, step by step, careful not to let them creak. My heart was pounding so loud I figured they could hear it on the other side of the walls. The bedroom door was half open, and I saw movement. A shape. Two shapes. Then I recognized the color of Emily's blouse. She was pinned against the dresser by a taller figure, with short, sandy-colored hair, arms wrapped around each other, bodies pressed close. She let out a soft moan, and I felt my chest tighten like a vice. They didn't see me, not from that angle. I could have rushed in. I could have yelled. I could have done all the things a man might do if he's certain he's about to find his wife in bed with another man. And let's be clear, I did find exactly that. But I didn't move. I stood, half hidden behind the doorframe, eyes locked on them, my breath caught in my throat. I saw her arms around his back. I saw the shape of his hands pressing up under her blouse, sliding over her waist, up to her bra. I watched her throw her head back, biting her lip to stifle a gasp. It was like I'd stepped out of my own life and was watching a stranger's nightmare, except the bedroom furniture was all mine. The smell of her perfume was familiar. The color of her bra, something I remembered from our last anniversary. That was more than enough to confirm what I suspected. But I stayed there, transfixed, couldn't tear my eyes away, even though everything I believed about my marriage, my wife, my life, was collapsing. My head started spinning. I heard a ringing in my ears, yet I didn't barge in. Instead, I quietly stepped back, down the hall. My heart hammered so fast, I felt nauseous. I slipped into the spare bedroom. There was a small closet in there, a bunch of old stuff stacked, including a box of electronics I'd meant to throw out or fix at some point. I rummaged through it, mind racing. See, years ago, I'd installed a simple home security camera in our bedroom. Emily used to joke about it, said I was paranoid. But one day the camera just died, or so we thought. And I hadn't bothered with it since. Something about that moment made me think, if I can get this old system up and running, maybe I can record them. For evidence. For something. My mind was half crazed with betrayal and the urge to do. I didn't even know what. I found the battered camera and some cords. My hands trembled. Part of me wanted to rush in and fight. But another part, the more calculated side, realized that confrontation right then would give them a chance to spin the story, or deny it, or worse. Maybe they'd pretend it never happened. Or maybe I just wanted to be sure, to watch them degrade themselves on camera. Whatever the reason, I was on autopilot. Eventually, the sounds from the bedroom died down. I heard a faint laugh again, a hushed voice. The man said something I couldn't make out. I caught Emily's husky reply. Same time next week. My stomach lurched, but I stayed still, controlling my breathing, trying to remain silent. Minutes later, I heard the front door open and close. Then the sound of a car driving off. I crept out of the spare room. Emily was in the upstairs bathroom. The door closed. The water ran for a while. Maybe she was washing off the evidence or collecting herself. Maybe she felt guilty. Maybe not. I didn't know. I tiptoed downstairs and slipped back into the garage. Picked up the nearest wrench, like I'd just stepped out for a moment. When she eventually appeared in the doorway leading from the house to the garage, her hair was damp. She was wearing a fresh blouse, and she acted like everything was normal. "Hey," she said. "I'm back." I looked at her, meeting her eyes. My blood thundered in my ears. I half expected to see shame or fear in her expression. But all I saw was mild curiosity, maybe the slightest flicker of tension. "Thought you said you'd be out till mid-afternoon." I said, my voice as casual as I could manage. She shrugged. "Got done sooner than I expected. Figured I'd just come home and relax." I nodded, playing the same game. "All right, well, I'm almost done here. You want anything for lunch?" She shook her head. Then she turned and went back inside. Just like that. No apology, no explanation, no sign that she'd just had another man's hands all over her. I felt like I was losing my mind. That was the day I started planning. Quietly. Methodically. I'd never considered myself a devious person, but betrayal unlocks parts of you that you didn't know existed. I spent the next few days fixing that old camera, hooking it up to a small, outdated hard drive I had lying around. In the evenings, when Emily was asleep or out, I worked on the software. I placed the camera in a hidden spot in our bedroom, behind a decorative lamp we hardly ever moved. I tested it. The feed was black and white, the picture grainy, but good enough. I felt a sick sense of satisfaction, like I was taking back control. I didn't confront her directly. I didn't change my routine. Still went to work, still drove Brian to school. If Emily wondered why I seemed distant, she didn't say much. She'd occasionally ask if everything was okay, but I'd just grunt or say I was tired. Maybe she was relieved not to have the argument. A week later, another Saturday, she said she'd be out running errands again. I pretended to believe her. Then I quietly parked my truck a couple of blocks away and slipped back into the house on foot. Took a position in the garage, the overhead door shut, listening. Sure enough, about an hour later, I heard a car pull up. Heard footsteps. Then the front door opened, and 2 sets of shoes clicked on the hardwood. I waited in the garage for a while. Anger boiled inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. If I messed it up now, I'd lose my proof. After maybe 15 minutes, I cracked the door to the main house. I didn't hear them downstairs, so I crept up. The bedroom door was closed but not locked. Through the thin wood, I heard the sounds, soft moans, the bed creaking. Her voice was lower, huskier than I'd heard it in years. A man's voice, quietly urging her on. I reached for the doorknob. My hand was shaking, slick with sweat, but I forced it steady. Slowly, silently, I turned the knob and opened the door a crack, just enough. They hadn't turned off the overhead light. Maybe they liked seeing each other. I recognized the shape of her slender body under him, arms wrapped around his back, nails digging in. His shoulders, his short blonde hair, her foot hooking around his calf. The sheets pulled partly off. Their movements were rhythmic, urgent, her head thrown back, eyes squeezed shut. A wave of nausea and fury hit me. It took every ounce of will not to explode right then. But I clenched my teeth, memorizing every second. The camera was across the room, capturing it all in black and white detail. I saw them clearly enough, though. He was in decent shape, younger than me. She was pulling him close, panting in his ear like some woman I didn't even recognize. I closed the door softly, retreated. My mind reeled. That image burned into my skull. When I made it back down to the garage, I almost collapsed against my workbench. My breathing was shallow. My face felt hot. Eventually, I heard them come downstairs, giggling, whispering. The front door opened and shut. Then his car started. I caught a glimpse through the garage window. A sporty little sedan. Definitely not cheap. He drove off. Moments later, I heard Emily humming in the kitchen. Humming like nothing had happened. I almost smashed my fist through the garage wall. Instead, I forced myself to breathe. That was the last time I spied on them in person, but from that day on, the camera in our bedroom recorded everything. Every betrayal. Every gasp of pleasure they shared. Each time she lied to me about errands. Over a month or two, it became a pattern. In between, she acted like a normal wife. Cooked dinner, paid some bills, asked how my day was. She even let me kiss her a couple of times, though she seemed distant. That taste in my mouth when we kissed. I tried not to think about whose lips she'd been on hours before. Something strange happened to me during that period. I stopped feeling shock. I stopped feeling sadness. It crystallized into a cold rage, the kind that doesn't burn bright but sits there, fueling you. I started plotting ways to tear her life apart. Not just leave her. No. Leaving was too easy. She'd been stealing from me, my dignity, my pride, my home. I decided I would show her what real fear looked like. I didn't know who the man was until he showed up unannounced on a different Saturday. Emily had gone shopping. Brian was out at baseball practice, and I was home alone. I heard the doorbell ring. So I opened the front door by force of habit. Saw a man standing on the step. Short blonde hair, maybe early 40s, wearing a crisp dress shirt and slacks. He looked well-groomed, like some kind of salesman. For a moment, I just stared at him, not recognizing him in this context. Then I saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes, and I realized, this is the guy. The one I'd watched pawing my wife in my own bed. He introduced himself as Michael. Told me, calm as you please, that he was the father of my son. The words were like a punch to the gut. He said he wanted to do the right thing. He held out a piece of paper, some official form with a blank signature line. I glanced at it. I saw Brian's name. The form was some kind of paternity acknowledgement. My head swam. Wait, I managed. What are you trying to tell me? He repeated, I'm Brian's biological father. Emily and I had an arrangement years ago. I didn't want to disrupt anything, but I think it's time to make it official. I want to be involved in his life. Look, man, I'm just trying to do right by the kid. At first, I thought it had to be a joke. But I looked at him again, noticed the shape of his jaw, a flicker of something in his eyes. Familiar. My mind flashed back to the timeline. Around the time Emily conceived Brian, I'd been away on a 3-week job training in another state. It was possible. I felt dizzy, like the ground had shifted. That form in his hand had Brian's name typed on it. Nothing else. No father's signature. That blank line was supposed to be for me, or for him, or for both of us. Who the hell knows? I said nothing. I just stared. He must have seen something in my face, because after a moment, he swallowed nervously. Then he mumbled something like, I'll come back. And he turned to leave. He was halfway to his car when Emily came around the corner of the house, carrying a grocery bag. She saw him, she saw me, and her face went white as a sheet. They locked eyes. No words needed. Everything was out in the open, just like that. Michael took off. Emily was left standing in the driveway, groceries shifting in her arms. I didn't move. She stepped forward, but I just looked at her. That was all it took. In that silence, we both knew that I knew everything. She didn't say a word. She looked down, eyes darting like a child caught in a lie. Then she hurried past me, heading into the house, setting the groceries on the kitchen counter. I followed slowly. The rest of that day was surreal. We didn't argue. We didn't talk. She lingered in the kitchen, occasionally glancing at me. I sat in the living room, thinking about the dozens of videos stored on that old hard drive in my garage. Thinking about the fact that Brian, my son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the kid I drove to ball games, might not even be mine. But no tears came. It was like my heart was numb. That evening, I did something symbolic. I took the old truck out and drove to the steakhouse where Emily and I had our first date. The place had sentimental value, or so I thought. I booked a table for 2 under a false name. Then I had dinner alone, savoring the bitterness, letting the irony of it sink in. I told the hostess it was a special evening, an anniversary. She smiled politely. I called it the commemoration of betrayal in my head. Maybe that was dramatic, but I felt like I needed a ritual. I ate in silence, tasted nothing, returned home after dark. She was waiting in the living room, tears in her eyes, but she didn't speak. I didn't either. Just walked upstairs to our bedroom, pulled out the old hard drive, hooked it up to my laptop on the dresser, brought up the black and white footage from the night Brian was conceived, the earliest recorded date. The camera had apparently captured that particular moment of betrayal. Maybe it was a test run from back then, or maybe I'd mislabeled the date, some artifact from old software. Whatever it was, I had enough. Pressed play. Showed it to her with the screen turned so she had a front row seat. She was wearing pajama pants and an old t-shirt, hair messy from stress, eyes wide with horror. She didn't move. The flickering images on screen showed her younger self with Michael, the silhouette of their bodies. The date stamp told me everything I needed to know. That night, I'd been gone on a job. And there she was, in my bed. I stared at the laptop. She stood a couple of feet away, hugging herself. I could hear her breathing, ragged, shallow. She didn't speak. She didn't beg. She just trembled. Maybe she knew it was too late for apologies. That night, she slept, or rather, lay awake, on the couch. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. My mind was oddly calm, as though some part of me had decided on the next steps, and now there was nothing to do but wait. The next morning, I drove Brian to school. We spoke about some trivial thing. He asked if I could come watch him at baseball practice that weekend. I said sure, lying through my teeth, not sure how I'd even look at him after that. But I did my best to sound normal. He didn't suspect a thing. When I got back home, Emily was sitting in the kitchen, wearing the same clothes from the night before. I walked in, and she stood up, tried to say something, but I cut her off with a raised hand. Out, I said, motioning toward the door. Now. She hesitated. David, please. I repeated. Now. My voice sounded cold. She followed me out to the front porch, arms crossed over her chest, as if to protect herself from the chill. The sky was overcast. Felt like it might rain. I pulled out my phone, turned the volume up, tapped my screen a few times. I'd already prepared a short clip, the worst one I had from the footage. Clear enough that no one could doubt what was happening. I pressed upload. The progress bar appeared. Then I met her eyes as the percentage ticked up. She looked at my phone, then at me, confusion giving way to horror. David, what are you doing? I didn't answer, just waited as it hit 100%. The file was online now, in a private group I'd created with some of our family and neighbors, a couple of coworkers too. Enough people that there was no chance to contain it. Then, after a moment of consideration, I shared it to a second group, a bigger one, also people in our social circle. I didn't post it publicly on a major website. I wanted to keep it somewhat controlled, at first, but I intended for the word to spread like wildfire. By the end of the day, more folks would see it, talk about it, forward it. I had no illusions. This was the nuclear option. She started shaking, tears rolling down her face, voice cracking. Why are you doing this, David? My response was calm, almost businesslike. You wanted freedom, I said, as if discussing a clause in a contract. Here it is, complete with everyone's knowledge. That's the price. She opened her mouth, closed it again, unable to form words. I stared at her, expressionless. In my head, I kept remembering all those times she'd moaned for him. I wanted her to feel that helplessness, that sense of her life spinning out of her control, just like she'd done to me. She sank to her knees on the porch, sobbing quietly. I felt no pity. I turned around, walked back inside, letting her handle the fallout. Over the next few hours, the calls started. Friends, family, people from church, my sister Sarah from another state, even my coworker Tom. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Some were confused, some outraged, some just in shock. I took none of their calls. The message was clear enough. By evening, Emily had locked herself in the bedroom. I let her. I sat in the living room, flipping through channels, not watching anything. Eventually, I heard the bedroom door open. She came downstairs, eyes bloodshot, face pale. She said something about how she had to quit her job because word had gotten out. She was a bank clerk. Reputation matters in that line of work. She wanted me to take down the video. I told her no. My tone was flat, unwavering. You wanted to be with him, not me, I said. Now you can explain yourself to everyone who sees it. She looked like she might faint. Her voice shook. Brian's going to hear about this. I said, he deserves the truth about who his real father is, don't you think? She started to say something, but I cut her off. I suggest you figure out where you're gonna live, because this house isn't yours anymore. She pressed her hands to her face, sobbing. I felt not a scrap of remorse. A couple of days later, Michael disappeared. Emily tried to call him, apparently, but he wouldn't answer. Rumor had it he left town, or at least was keeping a low profile. Maybe he realized that stepping forward would put him on the receiving end of a scandal too. That left Emily alone to face the music. The neighbors whispered, stared. Her relatives called her in tears. She ended up resigning from the bank, just like she'd said. Meanwhile, Brian picked up on the tension. He saw how we avoided each other, how Emily had dark circles under her eyes. Then kids at school started talking. They'd heard from their parents. Before long, Brian confronted Emily. There was a huge blowout. I wasn't present for it, but I heard him yelling from his room, calling her a liar. That was the only time I felt a pang of regret. He didn't deserve to be caught in this, but I told myself it was her doing, not mine. Shortly after that, Emily packed a couple of bags and left. I don't know where she went. Maybe a motel, maybe some friend's place. All I know is, she walked out without a single word to me. Just as well. And me. You'd expect me to be furious, devastated, or maybe throwing a party. But I just felt numb. The phone calls finally tapered off. People got tired of the scandal. New gossip came along. Life moved on, as it always does. I quietly met with a lawyer. Went through the motions. Stopped wearing my ring. I told my lawyer I wanted everything done by the book. If Brian truly wasn't mine, I'd figure that out with a DNA test if needed, but I'd been the only father he'd known. So maybe that was enough. I wasn't sure. Didn't matter at that moment. My biggest priority was ensuring Emily couldn't use me for a single cent beyond what the law forced me to pay. If she insisted on child support for a kid who might not be mine, I'd fight it in court and let the judge see the videos. Let them weigh the facts. Let the ugly truth come out. I'm not proud of any of this, but I'm not ashamed either. I did what I felt I had to do. That sense of violation. Finding out your wife is sleeping with someone else in your bed, for who knows how many years, does something to a man. You either snap and end up in a jail cell, or you shut off your emotions and retaliate with cold precision. I chose the latter. Some might call it cruel. But let me tell you this. After all those months of walking around feeling like a fool, I slept better once I blew her secret open. I slept like a baby, in fact. Now, here I am, writing this on r/serve of Infidelity, because the court hearing is coming up soon, and I'm anticipating all the drama that might follow. People ask me if I regret posting that video, if I regret turning her life into a public spectacle. And the honest answer, no. She destroyed me first. She made a mockery of our marriage. She invited that man, Michael, into my bed, in my own house, while I was out in the garage, working my hands to the bone for her and Brian. They treated me like a joke, like a placeholder. So I took the nuclear option. That's the kind of man I am, apparently, the kind who can't abide betrayal. Don't want me going nuclear on you. Don't give me cause. Do I regret the collateral damage with Brian? Sure, he's a kid. He's the only real victim in all this. But guess what? If he truly is Michael's son, maybe he deserves to know that. If he's mine, then I'll still be there for him the best I can. But that doesn't mean I have to forgive Emily. Some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. I'm not asking for sympathy here. Most folks will probably say I went too far. Maybe they're right. But if you've never had your heart crushed like that, if you've never discovered your wife moaning another man's name under your own roof, you can't really understand the fury and humiliation. It's like looking in a mirror and seeing a pathetic version of yourself. All trust gone. So yeah, I pushed back. And that moment, that morning on the porch, when I pressed upload and watched the video go live, looking Emily dead in the eye, that was the real turning point for me. I wanted her to see that I wasn't the same man she thought she could manipulate. In that instant, her fear was palpable. And that's what I wanted. Not her apology, not even her regret. I wanted her to be afraid, to realize that actions have consequences, and some of us don't just roll over and accept the pain. She once told me, on the day she unleashed that line, "You were never a real man." I guess we have different definitions of what a real man is. To me, a real man keeps his word, provides for his family, doesn't go looking for trouble. But if trouble finds him, he ends it on his terms. A real man doesn't shy away from the fallout. He stands by what he's done, no matter how ugly it might be, because letting someone walk all over you without consequence, that's the real shame. So that's the story. Maybe it's not the neat feel-good confession some folks expect. There's no redemption arc here, no moral lesson about turning the other cheek. It's just the truth. If it helps someone else see the warning signs or gather the strength to do whatever they feel is right in their own messed up situation, so be it. I'll be sitting in court soon, facing Emily across the room, watching lawyers hash out the wreckage of our marriage, discussing paternity tests, assets, custody. Maybe she'll try to twist it so I look like the monster. Fine. Let them see the evidence. Let them see the footage of what she did under our roof, all those times. Let them read those forms that Michael brought to my doorstep. I've got nothing left to hide. And once it's all over, I'll go back to my shop, fix people's cars, live my life. I'll stand on my porch at night, watch the stars, and know I did what I had to do. She can label me cruel, vindictive, heartless, whatever. Doesn't matter, because at least I'm no longer a fool. And believe me, for a man like me, that's worth every bit of the price I paid to get here. I'm sleeping just fine these days. That's all I need.